Gen AI is not like a rules engine, right? It is extremely difficult to test, and there's always a chance of getting hallucinations, right? And we've seen things where a chatbot has said, "Oh yes, your reimbursement for this airplane flight will be covered," and in fact, it's exactly opposite of the policy, and then the person sues and the company has to pay, right? So
What are the challenges do you think we should solve for Gen AI before we try to use it to solve a problem?
I always call Gen AI the semantic parrot, right? It's a parrot just repeats things back to you. It doesn't really understand them. One great story is, ask your favorite generative AI engine how many times the letter R occurs in the word strawberry. The answer is none of the engines can do it. They'll all guess one or two or something like that, right?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast, Everything Product. Welcome to yet another exciting episode. Today, we have Dan McCre, a true veteran in the field of generative AI. So, Dan's journey in Gen AI began long before it became a buzzword. So, as the current head of artificial intelligence at TigerGraph and former distinguished engineer at Optum, Dan has been at the forefront of AI innovation, shaping the very landscape we operate in today. In this episode, we'll tap into Dan's wealth of knowledge. So we'll go through and understand the evolution of AI, practical strategies of integrating Gen AI into your products and processes. What are the most important AI concepts that are needed for product builders and business leaders? So whether you are an AI enthusiast, a business leader, or a product builder, this conversation will act like a generative AI 101 to you. So please stay tuned to the end of the episode, and thank you.
So Dan, right, like a lot of people are curious in building some of these generative AI products, right? So if I were a product manager in a company planning to build a Gen AI product, or maybe an aspiring product manager who wants to build this as a side product, can you walk us through the anatomy of the Gen AI product, or or the key components that are part of this products?
Yeah, I think that generative AI products are a lot like many other products that use emerging technologies, right? So there's risk factors, and there's ways to mitigate that risk. Um, very often we start out with what's called a pilot project, right? And the pilot project is just to prove whether or not a technology works. When you work with a vendor that claims they can do something, you need to hold that vendor accountable, right? We have all these vendors that are claiming that they have very, very low hallucination rates, and you fire it up and you find out, yeah, they're just as bad as anybody else. They're not real. GraphRag is the one thing that we're starting to see much, much better results, and we have to prove that to people during a pilot project. So the idea here is then, if you're going to use generative AI, by the way, I should contrast this with products that use rule-based systems, right? If you use a rules engine, right? If this, then this, right? You get a very consistent, reproducible test, right? Gen AI is not like a rules engine, right? It is extremely difficult to test, and there's always a chance of getting hallucinations, right? And we've seen things where a chatbot has said, "Oh yes, your reimbursement for this airplane flight will be covered," and in fact, it's exactly opposite of the policy, and then the person sues and the company has to pay, right? So what your chatbot says, even though there's a disclaimer, you can still be sued. So you have to be very cautious about that. It's hilarious about the large automaker that put in a chatbot, and somebody asked, "What do you think about your competitor?" And the chatbot gave all these glowing reports about the competitor. Boy,
Yeah.
it's a disaster. Well, bottom line is, you have to have very, very good tools that say, here's the topics that this chatbot will answer questions on. If it's not in this topic, don't answer the question, right? And they obviously didn't even put that in. They didn't test it and things. So there's a lot more risk with generative AI than many other decision tree systems. By the way, the rule I always tell people is Gen AI sometimes should be only a tool of last resort, right? It has the most risk. So if you can do what you want using decision trees and complex rules engine, and you can use generative AI to create sample questions and test sets, you can use Gen AI in your whole development things, but use the simplest possible model that you can. You should only be using generative AI if your rule-based engines cannot solve this problem, right? And so that's a very, very key thing. There are very, very specific large language models that do nothing but intent mapping. Right? If your job should, in fact, just be, first of all, just make sure you get the intent right. And if you have the intent right, then you're going to have a good chance you're going to match it to the right questions, and you're going to continue to build up the right question answer pairs. And that's all you need, right? You don't need a big fancy language model. You just use the smallest language model that maps the question to the right intent. That's it, right? So there's lots of things that I guide people to, and when I ran the Generative AI Center of Excellence, we had a very, very sophisticated tool for ideation. I think that's very key, where people put in their ideas, right? So, and we take any ideas, and we have big blank forms where you can just brainstorm, and then we have subject matter experts that contact you after you submit that to go through it, right? And of the hundreds of ideas that he came across, I would say about a third of them had viability, right? About 2/3 of them, they just didn't understand what generative AI, they could use a simple rule, but about a third of them were correct. Of those thirds, then you have to ask, how would I get this into production, right? Because production systems are often very complicated webs of components that you can't just do a forklift upgrade and put in the Gen AI layer, right? It's impossible. So of those third, you often see about half of them could be put into a production setting, and of those, only some of them are going to actually be cost effective, right? Because there's going to be cost and training and staffing and all this other stuff and mitigating risk. So the idea here is a good product manager has to manage the idea funnel. And the funnel is going to be, you want to encourage everybody to do ideas, and you want to give awards for great ideas. You want to do training to help people understand what ideas are better. You want to understand when to use Gen AI and when to use decision trees. And as your generative AI Center of Excellence matures, you have a larger community of advocates for generative AI that are asking questions to all the business stakeholders, funneling those through, and maybe they don't know whether or not it's good, but when they meet with a subject matter expert, they're going to be able to do this. So the bigger the funnel, the better. Giving awards, doing contests, doing hackathons, all great ideas to get more ideas coming into the funnel. And the bottom line is your savings are going to be, in general, not from one really smart person in your company that knows how to do this. It's going to be coming from gathering all these ideas and sharing the knowledge with everybody from product managers, business advocates, subject matter experts, business analysts, developers. If they all know the footprint of what Gen AI does, you're going to get good ideas coming through the funnel. So
That makes sense actually. Overall, you don't want to just put Gen AI on top of everything. Rather, think about all the problems and think about what is the right solution to solve the problem rather than trying to fit in Gen AI into everything.
yeah,
That makes sense.
I have a couple blogs on how to create a Gen AI Center of Excellence, and also the forms that you use to qualify those things are also on my blogs. And what's really interesting is you can use generative AI to actually build the pipelines to help qualify those ideas and give people feedback when they're doing things. So, okay.
Makes sense. Actually, I want to go deeper into the challenges that you were talking about, Dan. One is hallucination. I mean, similar to our human brain can hallucinate. Gen AI hallucinates for sure. And again, the other one that you also mentioned is the guardrails, right? Like the example that you said, you don't want to get glorifying reviews about your competitors to your customers because you don't get business. What other challenges do you think we should solve for Gen AI before we try to use it to solve a problem?
Well, although I'm a really big advocate of Gen AI, I think I know its weaknesses pretty well. And um, I always call Gen AI the semantic parrot, right? It's a parrot just repeats things back to you. It doesn't really understand them. So you really have to understand that just predicting the next token based on the context is not understanding the world. Right. And that's the foundation that I try to begin everybody's understanding with what Gen AI is and the challenges. Hallucinations will always be in your systems, and you can't get them out because you don't have a model of the world. Right. You will never have the perfect engine that will answer. Oh, one great story is ask your favorite generative AI engine how many times the letter R occurs in the word strawberry. And I think the answer is none of the engines can do it. They'll all guess one or two or something like that, right? Well, the reason is they're not trained. Nobody has asked that question in their training set, right? They all get it wrong, right? They simply do not understand what the word strawberry is and what its letters are. They just guess. And that's just a little story about how ludicrous it is for people to think that they'll get precision consistently out of generative AI. Right now, there are lots and lots of ways that generative AI can increase the productivity of people building chat tools. Don't get me wrong, but I always tell people the first group of users for a chatbot should be your internal users, your internal help desk, your internal employees, because you can train them to deal with hallucinations, right? When would you allow a really robust chatbot to be used by your customers? Only if you have a very, very exhaustive testing process, right? And you should spend 2 to 3 times more on testing a chatbot than on a rules engine, right? It's your testing budget is going to be much, much bigger. Right? You may get it done fast, but you have to be able to test. Are we detecting whether this question is in the domain that it should be asked? Right. So yeah, you can do that, and you can always put on disclaimers. LinkedIn did a very good analysis of how a chatbot saved their call center agents a huge amount of time, a 25% increase in productivity by putting in generative AI for their internal call centers for people who are having problems. And there's unquestioned that there's savings there, but there's risks. And the risks are when you have very ambitious people that ignore the testing process, and they don't bring in outside. Sometimes you need an outside view to do the testing. Your QA team should probably not be your development team, right? They have to come with fresh, and they have to know what it means to test these chatbots. So, okay, I can go on for that for a long time.
I was actually trying the strawberry one that you said. You're actually right. It said strawberry has 2 hours. I'm like, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and also I think what struck me is, and like I was reading somewhere that only maybe 3 to 5% of the data in the world is in the internet, and small portion of that is used to train LLM. So it's nowhere close to having all the information out there. So it will hallucinate. So you have to take the necessary steps to make sure you are getting the right output, right? Which
Yep.
because you cannot do it inside because everything is a black box, right? Inside, so you could only do it through the QA efforts, and which it could be humongous sometimes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So one of the things that we're telling all of our customers is, if you are answering a question to in a chatbot, you should always have an explain button on that, and that explain button should traverse a model of the world, your knowledge graph, to prove that it has evidence to support that answer. Right? If your chatbot does not have an explain button, why would you ever trust it, right? Why would a physician trust a recommendation from an AI agent that could kill a patient, right? You must have an explanation. You have to have references directly to the papers that support that this drug won't have side effects that'll kill your patient, right? So having explainable AI, and I have taught courses on explainable AI, and it's so important. And effectively, it doubles the amount of engineering that you need to do to have an explanational model around things. But it's essential for people to understand that, and we need to hold all of our vendors accountable for building those explain buttons in our intelligent agents.
Sounds good. Yeah. So Dan, in our previous conversation, I heard a lot of things that you're doing at TigerGraph. So could you maybe, give us some insights on what are the problems you're trying to solve, and how are you trying to further the whole Gen AI ecosystem forward?
Yes. Well, thank you for asking. I'm trying to not turn this into a commercial for TigerGraph, by the way. So I want to be very respectful of your audience, and not. But I'm working on some very exciting projects and some really hard problems. And just to summarize really quick, TigerGraph is a company that sells a distributed native labeled property graph. There are many types of graphs in the world that work on a single server. They assume a flat memory space. So all relationship traversals are pointer hops. And there are dozens of those, and they're very low cost and effective. TigerGraph is different in that we assume from day one that your graph has to span dozens and dozens of servers. So all of our traversals have to go between nodes. And we're one of the very few companies in the world that can do that. And the only one that can do it with transaction safe for enterprise experience and securely for role-based access. So we focus on big customers, right? Some of the biggest customers, biggest financial institution, manufacturing, supply chain, fraud analytics are the things. What I am most passionate about is not just little point solutions like fraud algorithms. I'm interested in building what I call holistic customer 360 views that intelligent agents can access. Right? So what do I mean by holistic? Holistic means that every time you touch a customer, every time they come to your website, every time they do a search, every time they buy things, every time they comment on social media, every time they return an item, every time they send an email, call a call center, get a net promoter score survey, hundreds of different types of touch points. Right now, they're scattered throughout the enterprise, right? The call center, the tech support, the product support, the sales things, the lead generation system, the marketing, the website logs, they're all over the place, right? What happens when you put all of that information together in one spot, right? And I have a very important story I tell. We call it the jellyfish and the flatworm, right? The jellyfish has a very, very simple neural system, about 8,000 neurons in it. It just floats in the ocean and it's opportunistic and waits for a fish to come along, right? But the flatworm was different. It had to crawl around the bottom of the ocean floor, and it had to build a model of the world around it so it could avoid its predators and seek its prey. Right? So unlike the jellyfish that lives in a simple environment, the flatworm had to evolve a model of the world. And that's what we're seeing in companies today. We have a lot of companies that are kind of like jellyfishes, right? They just float around there and they say, we'll just store our data in all these different silos and we're not going to bring it together. Or maybe we'll build a data lake, but we're not going to index it. We're not going to secure it. We're not going to make it fast to travel. We're not going to do metadata. We don't do data governance. It's just a total data swamp is what it comes. What happens if you load all of that data into RAM, where it's sitting, right? You can buy a terabyte server now for 25 grand that has 128 cores, right? For $20,000, you can do this for $250,000. You can buy a rack of this, and it can do 4 billion edge traversals per second. 4 billion edge traversals per second for $250,000, and you can do amazing damage with 8 terabytes of RAM. All of the information with all your customers in one spot. And then ask the question, what if I could build an intelligent agent to do deep insights, not just on your customers, but your products and your competitors, right? The jellyfish doesn't have a model of its competing jellyfish, right? It just floats around there. If you're really going to be a sophisticated customer, you have to not only model your customers and what products they like, you need to know exactly what your customers are going to react if you change a price on one of your products. That's what really modeling the world is about. It's modeling your customers and your products and all that in one massive integrated knowledge system. And granted, $250,000 is a lot of hardware, but it's amazing to see the deep insights that companies will get when they bring this holistic knowledge together. You know, I jokingly refer to this as a benevolent Skynet, right? What's Skynet? Skynet is kind of like this thing in the Terminator that was suddenly conscious, right? What if you had a chat agent that could answer any question about any customer? How did you find that customer? What was their source? How did they get? What was the first product they bought? What is their purchase history? Who's your most valuable customers? Here's a product that you think you're going to discontinue. What are your customers going to say if they discontinue that product, right? These are the important questions that we are not asking today because people are stuck in the world of storing their data on tabular systems. They say, oh, we're just going to count and amounts. We're going to just tell you if we change the shelf that we store the toothpaste on our store, this is going to be changing our sales, right? But they're not comparing. They're not doing similarity. They're not analyzing what the key influences are and what the influences are saying and what they have to do to change a product to get the influencers to say things. And they spend the minimal amount of leverage to get the maximum amount of new sales. That is what AI is going to bring to customers. So that's what I'm passionate about, that holistic view of customers.
Yeah, essentially you're saying that like all of these companies have islands of information spread out, and they try to make a sense of what a customer profile is through this information, right? But what you're trying to say is like you're actually getting all of this together, having AI on top of it, and then making more sense of this data rather than just doing it the rudimentary way, right? Yeah, exciting.
Yeah. I think we're also in the area of what we call hyper-personalization, right? Before we would take customers and we'd put them in buckets, right? You're a Minneapolis customer or you're a Phoenix customer. Well, if you're in Minnesota, we're going to give you a coupon for a snow shovel, but we're not going to give you the coupon for the snow shovel in Arizona. That's very, very coarse hyper-personalization. Hyper-personalization means that you're a fan of these new lithium batteries and you're an ideal candidate to get an electric snowblower that uses these cool lithium batteries. That's your hyper-personalization because you're looking at Twitter and you're looking at Facebook and you're looking at all the feeds and this person just bought this new lithium battery and they really want to use it more. Wow, that's your customer. Right? That's how you precisely match your products to the customer's needs. Hyper-personalization. If you don't store all this information about your customer in one spot and you can't do 4 billion edge traversals per second on your $250,000 server, what are you going to do? You're going to put it in all these tables and you're going to put it in the cloud and you're going to hope that overnight some batch job will somehow save you. And it may not. Right? It's real time, it's chat, it's real time analytics, and it's agents that are always looking for new opportunities to help provide value to your customers.
Yeah, we actually, a fun part is like we actually did a podcast just 2-3 weeks ago on the topic of hyper personalization. Yeah, that was a very intriguing one as well.
I just wanted to say the other thing I write a lot about is the opportunities for education here too. Because everything I'm talking about with products applies to what course should I take? What section of the book should I read? What chapter am I most curious about? What Python sample code should I use to do this algorithm? Those are all hyper-personalized recommendations for our students. And it is my belief, I firmly believe this, that if we have $100 million, we could build an example of hyper-personalization for education, and every student across the entire planet could have hyper-personalized education. We're not that far away. And I think that's going to happen within the next 5 years.
One quick comment for me. So this actually is a very interesting concept for me. Like as I learned about this, right? So a lot of times when you see students in classes, right? Some of the students learn fast, some learn slowly, right? Some are more visual, right? Some are more expressive, right? So there are different ways of learning just in the same class. So I think this is
Yes.
a very big enabler if you can, make this happen through hyper
Yes.
personalization just for education.
And the tragedy of education in America is that when an instructor does the lesson plan, they can't target the most advanced students. They have to pick the bottom third, and they target the lesson plans for the bottom third of the class. All of us fit in a normal distribution of how quickly we learn a topic. It could be not that we're stupid. Maybe we don't have the right background. Maybe English isn't our primary language, right? Everybody learns at a different rate, right? Why not allow people to have the tools, the resources, and build a beautiful graphical simulation in the way that our students learn, be adaptive learning. So I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. Actually, I want to ask on the same lines, right? How do you think Gen AI would evolve in the next probably near term of like 1 to 2 years, or probably in the next 5 years?
It's a great question. I have a simple rule about predicting the future. There's a very famous quote by a person named Paul Sappho. And Paul Sappho's quote was, never confuse a short distance with a clear view. Never confuse a short distance with a clear view. So I'm going to give you a very clear view of the direction that we're going, but I'm not going to actually give you dates. Okay, I'll just tell you the direction. I'll give you some ballparks, but it's
The
you know
product manager way. We call it the product
yeah,
manager way.
yeah. When will we ship? Well, when our acceptance tests all pass. That's all you say. You never product managers should never say we will ship on this date. You say when the pie is done baking, then we serve it. When is it done baking? Software takes different time, right? So it's when we pass acceptance test. That's when you ship, right? So calendar-driven design has often been the greatest fatal error of many, many companies. And I always respect a company that will never tell me when they release a product. It's when it will pass the acceptance plan. Anyway, what I really want to do is just talk about the direction of what we're going. And this is controversial because there's a lot of people who believe that large language models are just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're doubling in cost every time they double in size, right? Rumors are that it's $100 million to train GPT-4, and it's going to be maybe $1 trillion to train GPT-6 or something like that, right? So, and the amount of CPUs, but I don't believe that's the way. I don't believe even if you have a neural networks that's 10 times as big, it will still not be able to understand how many R's are in the word strawberry because it was never designed to do that. It was only designed to predict the next token, right? So I don't believe it's going to happen. I believe that what has to happen is that you must marry knowledge representation, models of the world, and statistical models and bring them together to solve problems where they're constantly going back and forth. They're saying, oh, here's the decomposition, here's the 10 queries, run these 10 queries. Well, these two didn't work, refactor these queries. Okay, these queries are taking too long, let's go optimize these queries. Okay, now we got all these queries running and we're getting the right results. And now we're going to prove it, we're going to check it all with these queries. It's only when we really build AI that knows how to generate queries of models of the world that we will have true intelligence. And it will be verifiable true intelligence. And it will be able to understand what a word is and what letters are in that word because it will have models of those things. So So I think within 5 years, we will teach generative AI how to write complex queries on trillion vertex knowledge graphs. By the way, when you do a survey for most companies and you ask what's the largest knowledge graph that you have, many companies are still at the tens of thousands, right? Tens of thousands of vertices in their knowledge graphs, right? They're very small. It took me almost 3 years to get to the 25 billion vertices at United Health Group, right? 3 solid years, 150 people working together to build the world's largest knowledge graph. And it could solve problems that nobody else on planet Earth can solve. Saved tens of thousands of lives because it could find these insights in real time about different combinations of drugs and things. Very, very few companies have the product leadership to do that. Very few. The Bay Area companies are exceptions, right? If you're Google, if you're Amazon, a friend told me that you get fired if you use a relational database on something that needs to scale to the web, right? You're required to use distributed key value stores and all their Paxos algorithms and S3 and all these other things that scale. And Amazon Product Graph is all 100 billion things, and that's how they generate recommendations. And their recommendations bring in $40 billion a year because their product graph knows how to do recommendations, right? Hyper-personalization. But will that impact a lot of the small to medium companies? Not without product leadership. Right? I'm not worried about the Bay Area companies. I think they have plenty of good people. It's interesting how Microsoft owns LinkedIn. LinkedIn's liquid database does 3 million queries per second on a graph. But if you ask Microsoft, I want to run a graph database, they'll give you Cosmos DB, which has 6 orders of magnitude slower performance, right? So they don't offer that as their commercial, and the reason is that they want you to buy Microsoft SQL Server, which doesn't do relationship traversal. So we see these things happening. We know that within Microsoft and Google and Amazon, there are huge efforts to try to conquer AI. Some of them are just going to keep pouring more money into large language models, right? OpenAI, that's what they're going to do. They're going to try to get the largest, they're going to get racks and racks and racks and rooms full of GPUs and try to train a better model and have experts. They'll ask the same question to 10 different versions of large language models and combine those results, like a combination method of experts. But the costs and the energy is huge, right? Summarize, I think there has to be an easier way, and I think it's combining large language models with models of the world that will conquer general AI and give us the best experience. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really, really good answer of what your view is and how would this develop as we go. So yeah, maybe this could be a really good way to end the podcast on a good note, expecting a very bright future. Dan, we covered a lot of these concepts, right? If you were to refer people to certain books or blogs, like what would they be? And if people want to reach out to you or learn more about you, where can they find you?
You can reach me at Dan McCre on LinkedIn, and I'm a pretty active poster on LinkedIn. And on my homepage, I have a link to my blog, and I'm not as regular as I should be, but there's a lot of articles there about generative AI strategy that I think are very relevant for product managers. I wrote a blog a while ago about how to use Gen AI to create a Gen AI strategy, which has some very interesting prompts. And a lot of people have been just using that as their prompt template to build Gen AI strategies. I encourage people to have fun. What do I mean by have fun, right? AI should be fun, right? It should be a fun experience. A lot of product managers, when I first say I own AI people, they have this scared look in there. Oh my God, that's the Terminator, right? And they're full of fear. It's fear of the unknown. I ran a project for all the product managers within United Health Group and Optum called the AI Racing League. And we got all the product managers into a room and we set up a Raspberry Pi on a RC car. And they had to drive around the track 10 times, gather 20,000 images. They then copied that on a jump drive over to a GPU. We ran a program that built a model. They had to take their model, put it in the car, and then their car had to drive around the track by itself. And they learned all the steps of what is it like to gather data, data quality, building the model. Does the model run? Can you test the model? Does the model make predictions of the angle and the speed and stuff? And many people said that was the funnest product management class they ever took because it took away the mystery, right? It was just a bunch of steps. So I encourage people to go out and have fun with it. You can have so much fun with generative AI. You can ask generative AI to explain how to be a better product manager. So I encourage everybody to go out and have fun with AI. Have fun with you guys are smiling, you're laughing at me because you guys know you're having fun with generative AI, but that's what product managers have to do. They have to have this attitude. This is going to be fun. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to learn it. I'm going to have fun. We all have one great superpower, and that's our curiosity. Let your curiosity drive a series of questions, series of events, work with other people, build a community, and then build some awesome products that use generative AI. That's my suggestion. Have fun. Let your curiosity drive your initiatives. Okay?
Have fun. Get your hands dirty. Play with it. Awesome.
Yes.
Thanks for your time, Dan. Thanks a lot for being on the podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, and I wish you guys luck. I'm very honored to be part of your podcast series, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of it too.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Dan.
All right.